In his second visit to the Texas-Mexico border, President Biden met with Border Patrol and immigration officials in Brownsville, attempting to turn the tables on his likely 2024 rival, former President Donald Trump.
President Biden returned to the Texas-Mexico border for the second time, aiming to tackle immigration issues head-on. Meeting with Border Patrol officials in Brownsville, he sought to outmaneuver his potential rival, former President Donald Trump. However, Texans haven't exactly rolled out the welcome mat, signaling the ongoing tension surrounding Biden's approach to border policies.
He's wasting his time. Mr. President, what are you doing here? By a stroke of a pen, you can stop this. You don't need Congress.
Texans are not political tools. In the border communities of Texas, the recent visits of President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump have left residents feeling frustrated and overlooked. These visits, which were meant to address the pressing issues of immigration and border security, have instead reinforced the perception that national leaders use the border as a dusty backlot for political posturing, rather than a place where the concerns and needs of the local communities are acknowledged. Dani Marrero High, an organizer with La Unión de Pueblo Entero, a group that advocates for Colonia residents, expressed the frustration felt by many in the border communities. She highlighted the repetitive nature of these visits, where elected officials from Washington, D.C. engage in photo ops, walk along the border wall, and have brief conversations with Border Patrol agents before moving on to their next destination. For the residents who call these border communities home, it feels like a missed opportunity for meaningful engagement and understanding. During their visits, both President Biden and former President Trump opted for carefully choreographed appearances alongside local officials from their respective political parties. These appearances, devoid of public events, further reinforce the perception that the border is being used as a stage for political posturing, rather than a place where meaningful discussions and actions take place. The residents of the border communities have grown tired of being used as political pawns in the national immigration debate. They want their voices to be heard and their concerns to be addressed. The visits of President Biden and former President Trump were seen as missed opportunities to acknowledge how border policies directly impact their lives. One of the pressing issues that the residents hoped would be addressed is the water crisis affecting the region. The closure of the sugar mill, which has been a vital economic pillar for the community, has left many without jobs and uncertain about their future. Yet neither President Biden nor former President Trump mentioned this critical issue during their visits. The lack of attention to local concerns further reinforced the feeling of being ignored and used as political tools. In the lush region of the Rio Grande Valley, wide blades of sugarcane stretch towards the horizon, thriving under the late winter rains. For over a century, this lucrative crop has flourished in the tropical climate of South Texas, contributing to the state's vibrant agriculture industry. However, a looming water crisis threatens to bring about the demise of the Texas sugar industry, leaving farmers and thousands of jobs in jeopardy. Recently, Rio Grande Valley Sugar Growers Inc., a cooperative of 86 valley farmers, made a devastating announcement. They revealed that they would be shutting down the state's last sugar mill, citing a lack of water flowing into the irrigation canals that crisscross the region. This decision has sent shockwaves through the community, as it marks the end of an era and the loss of a vital economic pillar. The blame for this water crisis falls squarely on the federal government, which has failed to enforce a 1944 international treaty with Mexico. Under this agreement, Mexico is obligated to share a third of the flow of the Rio Conchos, a tributary that meets the Rio Grande west of Big Bend. However, Mexico has fallen far behind on its water payments, neglecting its end of the bargain. The consequences of this water crisis extend far beyond the sugar industry. Citrus and melon crops, which have thrived in the region's heat and humidity, are also at risk. The dry climate of South Texas necessitates irrigation for successful farming, unlike the rainy conditions in Florida. The United States and Mexico share water rights to the Rio Grande, but Mexico's failure to meet its obligations has left Texas farmers with no choice but to plant fewer crops and face lower yields. The impact of the water crisis is staggering. The co-op sugar mill in Santa Rosa, once a behemoth of production, has experienced a drastic decline. In the most recent season, it produced less than 500,000 tons of sugar, a staggering 75% decline compared to its peak 6 years ago. CEO Sean Brashear places the blame squarely on the federal government, accusing them of not pressuring Mexico to pay its water debt. He points out the irony of Mexico turning desert areas into lush oases, while Texas farmers struggle to secure enough water for their crops. The closure of the sugar mill has far-reaching consequences for the community, community. Layoff notices have been given to all 463 employees, including harvesters, drivers, boilers, chemists, and engineers. Ray Felix Jr. and his two sons, Ray III and Damien, are among those losing their jobs. They reside in La Villa, a town near the sugar mill that is home to many employees. Ray Felix III, a hardworking young man, is uncertain about his future prospects as there are few comparable job opportunities available locally. He recently obtained a security clearance to work on offshore oil rigs, but the uncertainty of the job market leaves him and many others in a state of panic. Geraldo Jerry Lara, an engineer at the sugar mill, has witnessed the decline firsthand. He noticed that the co-op began delaying repairs on equipment in recent years, a sign of the impending crisis. Lara, who has been with the mill for 22 years, is frustrated with successive federal administrations for allowing the water crisis to escalate. He laments the lack of action from the State Department and the failure to take a more aggressive approach with Mexico. The water crisis not only threatens the livelihoods of farmers, but also has broader implications for the entire Rio Grande Valley. Dante Galeazzi, president of the Texas International Produce Association, warns that if the water shortage continues, it could have a domino effect on other industries. Citrus and vegetable crops would be among the first to suffer, followed by rural and municipal water systems that rely on agricultural water deliveries. Even industries like cattle could be impacted, leading to a devastating blow to the region's economy. Residents also expressed frustration with the polarizing nature of the national immigration debate. While President Biden urged Congress to pass a bipartisan immigration bill that would deter migrants from crossing into the country illegally and expedite processing for those with legitimate asylum claims, former President Trump stuck to his familiar script, characterizing migrants as criminals overrunning the country. The residents felt that their nuanced experiences and the complexities of the border region were being reduced to simplistic narratives for political gain. The border communities of Texas have historically been a Democratic stronghold, but in recent years there has been a shift in political dynamics. While Hillary Clinton won these counties by a significant margin in 2016, President Biden's victory in 2020 was narrower. This shift reflects the growing disillusionment with both parties and the feeling that their needs are not being adequately addressed. As President Biden and former President Trump toured the border, residents lined the streets, hoping to catch a glimpse of the leaders who have such a significant impact on their lives. Martha Long, who traveled with her children from nearby Del Rio, expressed disappointment when the former president and Governor Abbott skipped the crowded streets for a more covert entrance to the park. Despite the disappointment, Long remained supportive of former President Trump, believing that he is trying his best to address the concerns of Americans. The visits of President Biden and former President Trump have highlighted the disconnect between national leaders and the border communities. While the federal government has poured billions into border security efforts, the residents feel that their needs have been overlooked. The strain on emergency responders, such as the Eagle Pass Fire Department, has become overwhelming, with an increase in calls ranging from rescuing migrants from the river to responding to incidents along rural highways. Fire Chief Manuel Mello testified before the U.S. House Judiciary Committee, emphasizing the impact of border crossings on the city's social services and the lack of support from the federal government. Although both Trump and Biden have been criticized by the residents, Biden as the current president takes the bigger hit.
Most recently, as President Biden has failed to exercise his constitutional obligation to police the border and protect Americans.
Biden's border crisis. In the months leading up to President Joe Biden's inauguration, his advisors engaged in intense internal debate about the fate of his predecessor's hardline border policies. The question that loomed large was how quickly should they be undone? The answer, almost always, was that Donald Trump's mark couldn't be erased soon enough. Immigration advocates on the transition team defiantly shot down a detailed memo that called for turning back some migrants who cross illegally by making them seek protection in other countries. They pushed back against estimates of soaring migration flows if Trump's policies were dismantled. But in the end, President Biden recognized the predictions that more migrants might come to the border. He was firm in his belief that the policies instituted by Trump were cruel and inhumane, and they had to be jettisoned. On January 20th, 2021, President Biden took office with a clear mandate to reverse Trump's border policies. But little did he know that almost immediately, the numbers of migrants would exceed expectations. Plans outlined in a December document to fully resume asylum processing at land crossings were soon overtaken overtaken by events. The surge in migration caught the administration off guard, and they were ill-prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Children traveling alone shattered previous highs in March, making up the majority of the more than 4,500 people housed in temporary tents that were designed for a fraction of that capacity under COVID-19 standards. The Border Patrol encountered migrants in South Texas more often than ever before in June and July, dashing expectations for a common summer slowdown. The situation reached a boiling point in September when about 15,000 mostly Haitian refugees were camped under a bridge in the small border town of Del Rio, Texas. The chaotic scene stretched on for days as migrants waded back and forth across a river for supplies, and families slept in squalor. Images of agents on horseback corralling refugees went viral, further fueling the criticism of the administration's response. The Biden administration's uneven response to the rising arrivals sparked sharp criticism from both the right and the left, illustrating the consequences of scrapping Trump's policies without a new asylum system in place. As President Biden and his administration worked to undo the policies put in place during and after a spike in arrivals at the border in 2019, they inherited a broken asylum system that had been a challenge for years. This fractured system would sorely test Biden's immediate predecessors and prove to be a major hurdle for his administration. In the summer of 2014, large numbers of unaccompanied children from Central America's Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, showed up along the Texas border in the Rio Grande Valley. This profound demographic shift from predominantly Mexican men created what then President Barack Obama called a humanitarian crisis and left a deep impression on more enforcement-minded aides who would later serve in the Biden administration. Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras accounted for about 2/3 of all border arrests, and the number of families arriving reached an all-time high in the government's 2019 fiscal year. The spike in encounters with single adults during Trump's final year in office, after the launch of Title 42 authority, further complicated the situation. This authority allowed migrants to be expelled without a chance to seek asylum on the basis of the coronavirus, and it encouraged repeat attempts due to the lack of legal consequences. Against this daunting backdrop, President Biden took office surrounded by immigration experts with strong advocacy backgrounds. However, the administration was unprepared for the massive increase in people seeking refuge at the border. A close review reveals that the administration, stacked with seasoned immigration advocates, was ill-equipped to handle the surge in migration. Internal documents obtained by the Associated Press and AIM Media Texas, along with interviews with current and former U.S. and Mexican officials, migrants, shelter managers, advocates, and others, paint a picture of an administration caught off guard. When presented with the specifics of the reconstruction, the White House defended its record, acknowledging that building a fair, orderly, and humane immigration system would take time. However, critics argue that the administration's lack of preparedness and failure to implement a comprehensive plan has exacerbated the challenges at the border. One major structural problem that predates the Biden administration is the backlog in immigration courts. On average, it takes nearly 4 years for immigration courts to decide cases of immigrants not in custody. This backlog has added to the challenges the administration faces in processing asylum claims and making timely decisions. The broken asylum system, combined with the unexpected surge in migration, has exposed the need for comprehensive border reform. The Biden administration has taken modest steps, such as establishing a rocket docket for asylum-seeking families and restoring an Obama-era program for unaccompanied children. However, detailed plans for a humane asylum system promised during Biden's campaign have yet to be released. Still, one of the most pressing challenges faced by the Biden administration was the handling of unaccompanied minors. As required by law, the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, was responsible for taking custody of these children within 72 hours and placing them in suitable homes, usually with a parent or close relative. However, the department was woefully unprepared for the influx of minors, leading to a series of challenges and overcrowded facilities. Participants in early interdepartmental meetings revealed that Health and Human Services officials raised few warnings about the potential surge in unaccompanied minors. This lack of foresight resulted in a crisis situation, with overcrowded detention facilities and prolonged stays for the children. On February 7th, U.S. Customs and Border Protection opened a large complex of white tents in the Rio Grande Valley to accommodate the increasing number of unaccompanied minors. However, the facilities were quickly overwhelmed, with more than 500 children crammed into spaces designed for only 32 under COVID-19 guidelines. The conditions in these temporary holding centers were far from ideal, with thick plastic curtains replacing chain-link fences used as barriers in previous administrations. The overcrowding and prolonged stays were a direct result of the Department of Health and Human Services' inability to take these children off the hands of the Border Patrol Patrol within the required 72-hour time frame. The lack of preparedness by the Department of Health and Human Services forced the Border Patrol to engage in the child detention business, as they had no other option. The situation was further exacerbated by the difficulty in finding suitable homes for the children and the limited availability of working phone numbers and addresses for contact purposes. Belatedly, the Department of Health and Human Services sprang into action, aided by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. They opened emergency holding centers at various locations, including a San Antonio concert venue and military bases and convention centers in Dallas, San Diego, and Long Beach, California. Soon, the department had more than 22,000 children in its custody. However, even as some children were released to family members in the United States during asylum proceedings, the number of arrivals continued to rise, breaking records later in the year. A dramatic increase in border crossings during the summer months. The administration's optimism quickly turned to chaos as the numbers surpassed expectations and overwhelmed the system. Despite President Biden's harsh rhetoric and Vice President Kamala Harris's repeated warnings of "do not come," migrants continued to arrive at the border, driven by the change in presidential administrations and stories from friends and relatives who were quickly released in the United States. The Border Patrol's daily reports showed a sharp increase in migration flows in late June, defying the usual summer slowdown. The Rio Grande Valley sector, in particular, stopped more than 20,000 migrants in a single week, smashing previous records. The surge in crossings overwhelmed the Border Patrol and strained resources, leading to overcrowded detention facilities and overwhelmed officials. The administration faced challenges in processing and accommodating the increasing number of migrants, especially unaccompanied minors. This border catastrophe didn't begin with Joe Biden.
Today, our immigration system is broken, and everybody knows it. Families who enter our country the right way and play by the rules watch others flout the rules.
How past presidents responded. Throughout the history of the United States, immigration has played a significant role in shaping the nation. It has been a topic that has sparked debates, controversies, and even legal challenges. In the early years of the nation, the Founding Fathers grappled with the question of who should be allowed to enter the newly formed United States. The Naturalization Act of 1790, signed into law by President George Washington, established the country's first rules for granting citizenship. However, it limited naturalization to free white persons of good moral character, excluding Native Americans, enslaved individuals, and people of African descent. Fast forward to the late 19th century, and we see a significant shift in immigration policies. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, signed by President Chester A. Arthur, marked the first major federal law to restrict immigration based on nationality. It prohibited the immigration of Chinese laborers, reflecting the growing anti-Chinese sentiment at the time. In the early 20th century, President Calvin Coolidge left a significant mark on U.S. immigration policy by signing the Immigration Act of 1924, commonly known as the Johnson-Reed Act. This pivotal legislation introduced the National Origins Quota System, a framework that fundamentally altered immigration dynamics by imposing restrictions based on national origin. The implementation of quotas aimed to reshape the demographic composition of incoming immigrants, with a notable preference for those hailing from Northern and Western Europe. Conversely, immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as Asia, faced severe limitations under this discriminatory system. Amid the tumultuous backdrop of World War II, President Franklin D. Roosevelt responded to evolving labor demands by instituting the Bracero Program. This initiative, established in partnership with Mexico, facilitated the temporary migration of agricultural workers into the United States. Intended to alleviate labor shortages within the agricultural sector, the Bracero Program not only addressed immediate economic needs, but also sought to foster stronger bilateral relations between the two neighboring nations. However, the Bracero Program was not without its controversies and challenges. Despite its economic benefits, concerns emerged regarding the potential exploitation and mistreatment of participating workers. Questions regarding fair wages, working conditions, and legal protections underscored the complexities inherent in temporary labor migration programs. As such, while the Bracero Program served as a pragmatic response to labor shortages during a critical period in U.S. history, it also shed light on the ethical considerations surrounding immigration policy and labor practices. One of the most significant milestones in immigration policy came with the signing of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. This legislation abolished the National Origins Quota System and introduced a new preference system based on family reunification and skills. It aimed to promote diversity and equality in immigration, opening doors to immigrants from all parts of the world. The Trump administration, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, made border security a paramount paramount concern, advocating for aggressive measures such as the construction of a physical barrier along the U.S.-Mexico border. This proposal, commonly referred to as the border wall, was touted as a solution to curb illegal immigration and enhance national security. Additionally, the administration implemented a controversial zero-tolerance policy, which mandated the prosecution of all individuals caught crossing the border illegally. This policy led to the systematic separation of migrant children from their families, igniting a firestorm of criticism and condemnation, both within the United States and on the global stage. The practice of family separation sparked outrage due to its humanitarian implications, as images and accounts of distraught children held in detention centers circulated widely, prompting calls for immediate action to address the crisis. Contrastingly, during the preceding Obama administration, efforts were made to address the plight of undocumented individuals brought to the United States as children. In 2012, President Barack Obama introduced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals (DACA) program, offering a temporary reprieve from deportation and granting eligibility for work permits to qualifying individuals, often referred to as Dreamers. DACA was established as a response to the legislative impasse in Congress regarding comprehensive immigration reform. The program aimed to provide a measure of protection and stability for young undocumented immigrants who had grown up in the United States, recognizing their contributions to society and their lack of culpability for their immigration status. While DACA offered temporary relief, it also highlighted the urgent need for Congress to enact lasting legislative solutions to address the status of millions of undocumented individuals living in the United States. President Joe Biden has faced criticism from both progressive groups and conservatives regarding his handling of immigration reform. Critics argue that the lack of a coherent strategy has led to a surge in migrant arrivals, overwhelming processing facilities and straining resources. There are also concerns about the handling of unaccompanied minors and families seeking asylum, as well as the administration's approach to border security and enforcement. The future of immigration policies remains uncertain, with legal challenges and changing political landscapes contributing to the uncertainty. The ongoing debates surrounding immigration reform highlight the need for comprehensive and compassionate solutions, balancing national security, humanitarian concerns, and the economic impact of immigration will continue to be a complex challenge for future administrations. Accusations of police misconduct, including sexual abuse, have been made by immigrants, further fueling tensions between immigrant communities and law enforcement agencies. These disturbing allegations raise questions about the treatment of immigrants and the need for thorough investigations to ensure justice is served. The incident in Times Square between migrants and NYPD officers has sparked debates about immigration policies and law enforcement's treatment of immigrants. Supporters argue that officers were carrying out their duties, while critics highlight the need for greater accountability and transparency. The incident raises questions about the impact of immigration policies on law enforcement and the challenges they face in diverse environments. The clashes between migrants and police officers at shelters and other locations highlight the importance of improving police-community relations. Building trust and understanding between law enforcement and immigrant communities is crucial for maintaining safety and security. Community policing initiatives and efforts to address systemic issues can play a significant role in fostering positive relationships. Critics of immigration policies often raise concerns about the humanitarian implications of certain actions. The separation of children from their families at the border under the zero-tolerance policy, for example, sparked widespread outrage and calls for more compassionate approaches. Balancing national security with humanitarian concerns remains a complex challenge for policymakers. The controversies and debates surrounding immigration policies highlight the urgent need for comprehensive immigration reform. Experts emphasize the importance of a multifaceted approach that addresses the underlying issues contributing to clashes between migrants and law enforcement. This includes improving police-community relations, implementing community policing initiatives, addressing systemic issues, and promoting accountability and transparency within law enforcement agencies. The future of immigration policies remains uncertain due to ongoing legal challenges. Court rulings and interpretations of existing laws can significantly impact the direction of immigration policies. The outcomes of these legal battles will shape the future landscape of immigration in the United States. Immigration policies are also subject to the changing political landscapes. Shifts in power, new administrations, and evolving public opinion can lead to significant changes in immigration policies. The priorities and approaches of future presidents and lawmakers will play a crucial role in shaping the nation's stance on immigration. The need for comprehensive immigration reform remains a pressing issue. The current system is often criticized for its complexity, inefficiency, and lack of clarity. A comprehensive approach that addresses border security, pathways to legal status, and the needs of the economy is essential for creating a more effective and fair immigration system. Finding the right balance between national security and compassion is a challenge that policymakers must navigate. Striking a balance that ensures the safety of the nation while upholding humanitarian values is a complex task. It requires thoughtful consideration of the economic, social, and moral implications of immigration policies. To effectively address immigration challenges, it is crucial to tackle the root causes that drive migration. This includes addressing economic disparities, violence, and instability in countries of origin. By investing in diplomacy, foreign aid, and international cooperation, the United States can play a role in addressing the underlying factors that contribute to migration. Thanks for watching. Click on the videos on your screen for similar content.